Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a true crime and makeup video. Um, it's been a while, but hey, I'm back. I did have a lot. Well, there's a case that I'm working on and it is still going as we speak. So I'm just kind of waiting for everything. Well, actually, I just got news today that the case is pretty much solved. Like, it's coming to an end. It's pretty much done with. So maybe in the next like 2 to 3 weeks, I'll be able to provide that case for you. I was kind of waiting to see how it played out, but I couldn't keep you guys waiting much longer. So today I have a very special 2-part case, and we're just gonna go ahead and get started with part 1. Okay, hopefully I remember how to do this. It's been a little minute, but we are back. And this story is this is more one of the tragic stories. This story, like, I don't want to give away too much detail, but this is not, like, you will never see half of the stuff in this story coming. That's what I'll say. Like, some of it is just like, are you serious? Like, you're kidding, right? I'm not kidding. This is this is actually what happened. And it's a sad one. I'm not gonna lie. It is so damn sad. It is just tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. This is a very sad story. When I was doing the research, like, I was in shock. I was shook. There was no way that I read what I was reading. But with that being said, this is going to be a 2-part story. Um, it's not like it's not a long story. Well, I'm not gonna say that all of them are long stories, but it's not like this one case. It's 2 separate cases. Let's say that it's 2 separate cases, but this is like, these 2 cases are linked to each other, if that makes sense. That's about all I can say. But this is basically like a part 1, and then the next week's case is basically like a continuation of the aftermath of this case, if that makes sense. I'm trying to explain it the best way I know how, and I know I'm falling short, but that's all I have to say about that. So with that being said, we are just going to jump into today's story. I do have some content warnings. This includes themes of kidnapping, sexual assault, child molestation. Like, this story is freaking wild. It's you like we about to buckle up because we finna go for a ride. Kenneth Eugene Parnell was born on September 26th of 1931, making him a Libra. Y'all, I don't know if I've ever said this on my channel, like, during these, but I'm a Libra, and I'm very ashamed. But I feel like I speak on behalf of all Libras when I say we don't claim him. We don't claim him whatsoever. Honestly, we gonna push him to the Virgos since he on the cusp anyway. He really not, but he's a September. If you're a September Libra, you basically a Virgo. So there's that. But yes, he is a Libra. He was born in Amarillo, Texas, to Mary and Cecil Parnell. And he was born during the Dust Bowl era of the Great Depression. If you remember from history class. If you don't remember from history class, baby, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not a history teacher, so I don't even know how to explain it. It's just, it was a lot of dust that was going on in like the Midwest or something like that. I don't know how to explain it, but he was born during the Dust Bowl era, so there's that. And when Kenneth was about 6 years old, his father would just completely abandon the family, forcing his mom to take Kenneth and his three siblings to Bakersfield, California. And when they moved there, his mom ended up opening a boarding lodge. Um, I'm not really sure how to describe a boarding lodge. I don't know. I probably should have looked that up before I started recording this video, right? But I did not. So here we are. She operated a boarding lodge. That's it. Now, it is alleged that at this boarding lodge, when Kenneth was about 13 years old, he was molested by one of the male lodgers. Again, it is a rumor. We do not know how true that is. But as I continue on with certain details of the case, you'll be able to draw your own conclusion if you think that it actually happened or not. Me personally, well, because I know what I'm about to say, personally, I do think that it's possible that this happened given what he goes on to do. So, yeah. Kenneth would spend the next few years of his life in and out of juvenile detention centers for things such as car theft and arson. And in March of 1951, Kenneth was arrested for a young boy after impersonating a police officer. Side note, if you watched my Edmund Kemper video, I'll link it in the cards. If you watch my Edmund Kemper video, you may remember that I tried to put this crime on him. It was not Edmund, it was actually Kenneth Parnell. I do not know how I managed to get those two tied up, but Edmund, baby, I'm so sorry that I put Kenneth's crime on you, even though you did far worse. Not gonna lie. Not to compare, no one's sin is greater than the other, but my apologies to Edmund Kemper for getting his story wrong. It was not Edmund, it was Kenneth. For this crime, Kenneth was sentenced to 4 years in prison, which is light work to say that he committed the crime that he committed. So he was sentenced to 4 years and he escaped. Like, you should be lucky that you're only serving 4 years. Why would you escape? But nevertheless, he escaped and he was recaptured. He definitely was. And I'm not sure if they added more time on for him escaping. I'm pretty sure that they did. But it's 4 years. Like, you're lucky you didn't get longer. What are you escaping for? Just do your time. Like, in a later interview with Kenneth, his reasoning for committing this crime was because his wife was pregnant and he needed to find an outlet. That is just a crock of shit, because you could have found a lovely young lady your age. You could have found a sex worker. Like, you could have done anything, but you chose to do that. Like, that is no justification. And I hope, well, I'm not gonna say my thoughts because I don't want y'all to think ill of me. At the age of 18, he married 15-year-old Patsy Jo Dorton. They had a daughter in 1951 and they divorced in 1957. Not sure why they separated. Pretty sure it has something to do with him going to prison and the reason why he went to prison. Don't know why it took her so long to file. Don't know who filed. I don't know. Also in 1957, Kenneth claimed to have gotten remarried, but there is literally no record of him ever being remarried during this time. So take that with a grain of salt. Although there is absolutely no record of the marriage, the woman that he claims to have been married to, the two did have a daughter together. In the early 1960s, Kenneth was arrested for armed robbery while in Utah. And while he was in prison for his crimes, his second quote unquote wife filed for quote unquote divorce. On July 31st of 1972, his father Cecil would also pass away. I'm not sure like if this had any effect on him. I didn't get any source saying that he was greatly affected by the death of his father. I'm not sure if they even maintained a relationship following him abandoning the family. I just don't know, honestly. I wish I did, but I don't. And that's basically all we have to go by. It is now December 4th of 1972, and Kenneth is now, I'm not sure if he was carrying on his mom's business or whatever the case may be, but he is currently working like in the lodging business. And I just want to point out this is a very, very important connection between this week's case and next week's case. I don't know what it is about lodging, lodges, whatever you want to call it, but it is very significant in both of these cases. It's just crazy. So on December 4th, Kenneth and a coworker, Edward Murphy, not Eddie Murphy, he is not involved in this case. They just happen to have the same name. Kenneth and Edward posed as missionaries for a local church, and they both came up with the plan to, I'm not sure if all along it was Kenneth's plan, which it probably was, but they came up with the idea to abduct a child. Yeah. And they were sitting in Kenneth's car, and they came up with the plan to just pretend to be missionaries and, dupe a child into thinking that they were selling, I think they were selling like church CDs or something like that. And they were basically using that to like kind of dupe the children, lure them into the car and take them. And unfortunately, this plan was dumb enough to work because 7-year-old Stephen Stayner was walking home, and he was approached by Edward. Kenneth never did any of the dirty work. He was approached by Edward. And Edward was telling him that he was a church missionary and that they were selling CDs or whatever materials they were selling around the neighborhood to earn money for the church, like drum up business for the church, things of that nature. So, Stephen is 7. He doesn't really know any better. So he's like, oh, that sounds interesting. I'll ask my parents if they would like to make a donation, whatever, whatever. Like real innocent. And that makes it so sad. Edward is like, we'll give you a lift home so that you can ask, your mom and dad if they want to purchase materials or make a donation to the church. So he's like, okay, great. I'll go ask them right now. And he's like walking home. And Edward is like, no, you don't have to walk. We'll give you a ride. So Stephen walks over to the car that Kenneth is driving, and he gets in, and they're asking him like, where do you live? Questions like that. And he's like, oh, I just live up the street and blah, 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 whatever a 7-year-old would say when you would ask them that question. I'm not exactly sure. So Stephen is in the car and he's thinking that he's going home, but they pass his home completely. They go in an entirely different direction. And I don't know, when you're a child, you don't really have a good sense of time, if that makes sense. So I'm not sure if he was really aware that he was being abducted as the abduction was taking place. He had no idea. He's only 7. So he's thinking that they're going to take him to the house, and he never makes it home. Unfortunately, Kenneth just kept driving and driving, and eventually they ended up in Kathy's Valley, which is like a small section outside of the area. It's like a, I don't know how to, it's like a, I guess you could say like a subdivision, I guess, or something like that. So, as any 7-year old would be, Kenneth is a little scared because he's like, you said that you were taking me home. Like, this is obviously not home. And Kenneth, with his sick ass, decides to tell Steven that his parents asked Kenneth to take care of Steven because they were unable to continue to take care of him. And because Steven is only 7, he is heartbroken, but he believes Kenneth's story. Like, he has no reason to not believe this man. He doesn't know him. He wouldn't make up something like that. But he also doesn't know any better because he's 7. Like, so he tells Steven that his parents can no longer afford to take care of him, and that the judge has granted Kenneth custody of Steven, and he changes his name to Dennis Parnell. But the craziest part is he raises him as if he's his own child. Like, he doesn't stop him from being a kid, I guess. Like, even though he abducted him, he's still like enrolling him in school and making sure that he's, still receiving his education. Like, he just basically abducted him and continued to raise him as normal. I don't want to say normal because of what happens, but he just continues to like raise him as if you usually would a child. That's like the best way I can explain it. Like, I mean, he was still enrolling him in school. That's what I'm saying. He was treating him as if he was his own child. There we go. And Steven, now Dennis, would remain in Kenneth's care over the next 7 years. He had this little boy for 7 years. And during those 7 years, Kenneth completely destroyed this little boy. He destroyed his innocence. He destroyed his childhood. He just completely destroyed him. Steven was subjected to several different types of abuse, physical, emotional, verbal, just like every type of abuse you can name, including the one that YouTube doesn't like for us to say. Yes, that happened as well. And he would also love bomb him. And by love bombing, like, I hope everyone knows what love bombing means. But if not, he would do something foul to him and then try to shower him with like love and gifts and everything like that to try to like make up for what he had just done. So that is definitely some real sick psychological torture that he is inflicting on this child. So, as I mentioned before, Stephen was held captive by Kenneth for 7 years. And of course, a 7-year-old is going to get older. They're going to go through changes such as puberty. And once Stephen started going through puberty, Kenneth kind of started to become bored with him, because obviously he's a pedophile. And I just want to say real quick, I know I keep getting a little sidetracked, and I'm sorry, but I want y'all to understand the definitions of words. So today we're gonna learn something. Um, Kenneth is a pedophile. Pedophile, which means that he has a sexual attraction to prepubescent children. This word, pedophile, gets thrown around a lot and it is sometimes used out of context. Yes, Stephen is still a child, but the older he got, the less that he resembled a prepubescent child, which means that Kenneth no longer had that attraction to him because he only had an attraction to prepubescent children. If he had continued to like Stephen past puberty, so post pubescent, he would be considered an ephebophile. Ephebophile. Known ephebophiles would be John Wayne Gacy. Like, he didn't like little kids. He liked them after they hit puberty, but before they became adults. Like, that is it's an actual word for it. So I just want to throw that out there because I keep seeing people saying that if you're 19 years old and you like a 16-year-old, you're a pedophile. No, you're not. Like, that's not how that works. But the proper terminology for that is an ephebophile. So Kenneth is not a pedophile. He's not an ephebophile. He's just a pedophile. So he only likes kids before they hit puberty, which is still disgusting nonetheless. Like, both of them are still equally nasty, but there's a difference between the two of them. So just wanted to wrap that up. So now that we got that out the way and we've established what Kenneth is, let's continue. So because Steven is now getting older, I want to call this boy Jody so bad. I'm so sorry. I don't know why, but Jody Plauché is just like really heavy on my mind. This case has like some similarities to it. And if you haven't seen the video, I'll link it up in the cards. But in my mind, I have to keep stopping and being like, his name is Steven. His name is not Jody. I'll link that video up in the cards. It's an equally important story. But Steven is now growing. He's going through puberty. And because he is now changing into post-pubescent boy form, Kenneth is no longer attracted to him. So, like, the fascination is kind of wearing off. And because he no longer feels that way about him still, he decides that it's time for him to kidnap another child. And the even more insane thing about all of this is that Kenneth had a girlfriend at the time. Her name was Barbara. And Barbara was equally as responsible for everything that happened to Steven. She is equally nasty. The two would actually engage in adult activity with Steven. And Barbara's excuse was that she thought that Steven was actually Kenneth's child. Girl, you're still nasty. Still nasty. Because what the hell? Like, oh, well, I thought it was his child, so it was okay. Like, please be for real. Please be serious. But neither here nor there. She is equally responsible for some of the things that Stephen had to endure at the hands of Kenneth. And because Kenneth was growing out of his attraction for Stephen, he used Barbara to try and solicit another young boy that they could now use as their plaything, which is so sick. So he and Barbara attempted to abduct a little boy, and their plans would always fail, thank God. They were just never able to accomplish their mission. And it got to the point where, like, Kenneth got frustrated and he no longer wanted Barbara to help him. So instead of continuing to ask Barbara to help because he was obviously getting nowhere with it. He was getting no luck. He decided to ask Steven for help because he's still a child, and most children would be. I mean, I'm just assuming this is his logic, because Steven's a child, and it would probably be easier for a child to lure in another child. So he decided to try to use Steven to help him to find another child, but Steven, going through everything that he went through, he did not want another person to experience half of the things that he had gone through in the 7 years that he had been living with Kenneth at this point. So Stephen, bless his heart, he would intentionally sabotage the mission so that they were unable to abduct another child. Good for him. Good for him. Because that's just, you're like, he's saving another person from going through what he's going through. Well, going through what he went through, because at this time I think the abuse had kind of stopped. At least one form of the abuse had stopped. So Kenneth started to catch on to what Steven was doing, and he would get frustrated and berate Steven for not being of any help at all. And I mean, like, did you honestly think that he would be on your side, sir? Did you really think that he would be on your side? Seriously. But neither here nor there. He got annoyed that he wasn't helping him to find another, I guess, find his replacement. So eventually he stopped asking Steven to help him. Good. Thank you. So February 14th of 1980, Kenneth gets the help of Sean Porman, who is also a minor. And oddly enough, he was like a friend of, I almost called him Jody. He was a friend of Steven's. And he solicited the services of Sean Porman to help him to successfully abduct 5-year-old Timothy White. So now Timothy is also in the mix with Steven and Kenneth, and at this time I think still Barbara. I think Barbara was still around. I'm not quite sure if Kenneth was able to make a move on Timothy. Not exactly sure. But I I think he wasn't able to. For some reason, he was unable to finally make his move on Timothy. For I don't know what the reason was, but for whatever reason, he wasn't able to follow through on whatever he was trying to do to the little boy. Thank God. So about 2 weeks later, on March 1st, 1980, Kenneth goes to his overnight job where he works at the lodging place. I don't know what to call it. The boarding lodge. There we go. So he goes to work and he leaves Timothy with Steven. And I'm assuming that Barbara was not there at the time, and it was just the two of them. And Steven just got tired. He just got fed up. He was just completely done with everything that was going on. And he also did not want to see this little 5-year-old boy go through what he went through for literally years, because Kenneth was able to get away with this for 7 years. I don't think we are realizing that he kidnapped this child and was holding him captive for 7 years. Steven is fed up and he's like, I can't take this shit anymore. And I'm not about to allow him to continue to get away with what he's doing. Like, at this point, he's getting dangerous because it's already bad enough that he's had me abducted for 7 years. And now he didn't went and found another little boy who he could probably hold captive for longer. Like, you know, he was able to get away with this so well. I completely understand, like, what his thought process was. So he grabs 5-year-old Timmy, puts him on his back, and leaves the house completely. So with little Timmy on his back, Stephen walked 40 miles. 40 miles. He hitchhiked. I didn't want to say walked. He hitchhiked 40 miles until he was able to get to, I think I'm saying this right, Ukiah, which is where Timmy is from. So once they're in Ukiah, Timmy and what is his name? Steven, sorry. Timmy and Steven end up at the police station where, because he didn't really know where else to send him. I mean, Timmy is like 5, so it's not like he knows his address or knows where he lives or anything of that nature. So not knowing where else to take him, Steven takes him to the police department, and he figures that the police will figure it out from there. And his intention, which this is just so heartbreaking, his intention was just to drop Timmy off. Like, that's it. He just didn't want Timmy to go through what he was going through. So his initial intention was to drop Timmy off. However, when he was dropping Timmy off, they were asking him questions because, like, you just turned up with a missing child. Like, we have to ask you some things. And that is when he starts telling them more information, and they are able to figure out that he has also been missing for 7 years, a couple of not states, but a couple of cities over. So they have both Stephen and Timmy in custody, and while they have, not in custody, but like in police custody, he's in the care of police at the time. And while they have the 2 young boys, they go and arrest Kenneth at his job in the middle of the night. Like, he was arrested before the sun came up. They were on it pretty quickly. So they arrest Kenneth and they return Timmy and Steven to their families. And unfortunately, it does not get better from here. I don't know the best way to say it, but the story does not end happily. So I'm not sure if it was out of shame, embarrassment, you know, whatever the case may be, but Steven decided that he did not want to tell anybody that he was SA'd by Kenneth. And because he denied to tell anyone that, Kenneth was only charged with 2 counts of kidnapping for kidnapping him and also kidnapping Timmy. Very tragic, if you ask me, because of the end result. Like, if only he had spoken up and said just anything else. It's just so sad because Kenneth could have gotten a longer sentence if only he had just spoken up a little bit. Kenneth was charged with 2 counts of kidnapping, and he only served 5 years. That's it. 5 years. His buddy that helped him to kidnap Stephen, Edward Murphy. Yeah, Edward was also sentenced to 5 years in prison, but he was paroled after 2. Sean, okay. Sean Portman, who is the minor that helped Kenneth to kidnap Timmy. He also served time at like a juvenile camp, I guess they It wasn't like prison. It was just like a juvie camp. He served some time there. I'm not sure how much time exactly, but he did, suffer some consequences for his actions. However, nasty ass Barbara, she got off scot free because, again, Steven didn't say anything about the abuse, so she couldn't be charged with abuse. And because she and Kenneth started dating after he had already kidnapped Steven, she couldn't be charged with the kidnapping. So she basically got away scot-free, which is, oh, that makes me so angry. It really does, because she's nasty and trifling, and she should be in prison just like everybody else. On January 3rd, at the age of 71, Kenneth Parnell is arrested again, and you will never guess what he's arrested for. If you guess for robbing a bank, you are wrong. If you guess for arson, you are wrong. If you guess anything other than kidnapping a child, you would be wrong, because that's what he got arrested for. Attempting to kidnap another child. This man asked his caregiver, because remember, he's 71 years old at this point. He asked his caregiver to purchase a 4-year-old boy for him for $500. He was going to give her the money for her to buy the little boy for him. It was going to be $100 for the birth certificate, like a fake birth certificate, and also $400 once the child is delivered. So the total was $500. Well, she knew his history, and so she turned him in. Good for her. She turned his ass in, and he tried to deny it, saying that he was adopting the little boy. But he asked for something very specific that let them know that he wasn't just trying to adopt this little boy. Kenneth requested that the child have a clean rectum. Why do you need a clean rectum if you're just trying to adopt a child to be there with you? Riddle me that. We knew he was lying. He knew he was lying. Everybody knew he was lying, because it don't make sense. It don't make sense at all. His caregiver played along with it, made it seem like she was going to do it. But of course, she reported him to the police, and police decided to set up a sting operation where they were going to catch Kenneth red-handed, and they did. They caught that ass, and they sent him to the slammer. He was convicted on February 9th of 2004. And he was sentenced to 25 years to life under the three strikes law. So the three strikes law basically says that if you're a repeat offender, you have to get a longer sentence the third time that you're arrested. So his longer sentence ended up being, sorry, I've been talking a lot. His third offense ended up being the 25 to life that he was ordered to serve. And if you thought that this story had a happy ending, you were wrong. Kenneth Parnell died of natural causes on January 21st, 2008 at the California Medical Center in Vacaville, California, which just so happens to be the same prison where Edmund Kemper is currently serving life. I still can't believe that man is still alive. That is insane to me. Edmund Kemper is still alive, y'all. I will never get over that until he is in the dirt. That man is still alive. That's crazy. As for Steven had a really hard time readjusting to his family's structure that they had for their kids. He struggled a lot because he was given freedom, I guess you could say, at Kenneth's place. He was allowed to smoke, drink, stay up late, do whatever. He basically was allowed to do whatever he wanted to do. So it took a while for him to like adjust to the structure of how a child is supposed to be raised, and it caused some trouble between him and his father. He did attend counseling, but he didn't get any further treatment because of his father. He basically was like he doesn't need it. Steven was bullied severely by other kids at school for what happened to him, which is fucked up because he had no control over that. Like kids are just they're just a bunch of little shits. But the kids were teasing him for what happened to him, and it was so bad that Steven ended up dropping out of school. Steven began drinking again, and he was kicked out of the family home, I'm assuming by his father. He and his father had a very strange relationship once Steven was found. And following him not being able to get readjusted to everything that was going on, they just never saw eye to eye. They just always butt heads. They always got into it, and they were never able to repair their relationship. Like they just stayed estranged for however long. Like they just never were. They were never able to make up and repair their relationship. Like it just wasn't happening. In 1985, when he was 20 years old, Stephen married 17-year-old Jody Edmondson, and the pair went on to have two children together, Ashley and Stephen Jr. Stephen also started working with child abduction support groups, and he converted to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If you don't know what that is, he became a Mormon. And on September 16th of 1989, when Stephen was on his way home from work, he was involved in a hit and run accident on his motorcycle, and he did not survive the accident. He did pass away, which is so sad. That's like this. Oh, that's so sad. I'm tearing up just thinking about it. Like, he passed away after everything that he had been through. He was getting his life back on track, and he was in a hit and run accident. And he, if I'm not mistaken, the car hit him and he flew off of his motorcycle, and he hit his head on a stop sign. I won't go into too much detail because it's very graphic, but um he did not survive the accident. About 500 people attended Stephen's funeral, and 14-year-old Timmy was his pallbearer. That's that's so crazy. The same child that he saved ended up carrying him to his grave. Yeah, so Timmy, of course, he had grown up. This is like 11 years later, but 14-year-old Timmy was his pallbearer, and Timmy would go on to become a sheriff's deputy for Los Angeles County. Unfortunately, at the age of 35, Timmy passed away from a pulmonary embolism. So this was just a tragic case. It did not have a happy ending at all. Oh my God, that is so sad. And that's the end of the story. That's it. The reason why I say that this story is two parts, because that's the end of that case. But the reason why I say the story is two parts is because Timmy had an older brother named Cary Stayner. And we will talk about Cary Stayner on next week. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hate to leave it like that, but thank you guys so much for watching. And do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in next week's case.